I'm here with Yavuz. Am I saying that right?
You're saying it perfect. The name is Yavuz.
Yavuz.
Yeah, perfect.
So emphasis in
And
the early, and it means
it means intrepid.
intrepid. And you have fearlessly, as an environmental gerontologist, gone into a space that, when I came back from Asia in 2014, was to me was very disturbing, and that is the value of older people in America. And you made a comment to me this morning that I would be surprised by how we're evolving in terms of
Absolutely.
managing senior living. Can you just talk a
Absolutely.
little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I work for a company. This is going to be a product placement, but not intended to be so. But the company is at the forefront of design in terms of how they approach senior living. And it does refresh, or buildings from scratch. And the
What's the name of the company?
direct supply.
Direct Supply, okay.
And what they do is they adapt older buildings to more of a hospitality approach, where there are lots of amenities that you wouldn't imagine would be in senior living. And we do assisted living, independent living, and memory care. It's varied slightly, but the main idea is that you should provide a space that's more akin to a high-end hotel, or in some senses like a home, as opposed to a more institutional space. And it's not us only that has this approach now. I think it's a major tectonic shift in how architecture is approached for senior living.
Well, this is motivating for me.
Thank you.
I have a specialty in age management medicine,
Mm-hmm.
but what's really interesting is that in the hours and hours and years of studying age management medicine, the curriculum drops off really at about 60 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
We really do not get into, we don't even acknowledge gerontology in that way. And I think that this topic gives us some food for future discussions as well. But I know for me personally, the spaces that I want to develop in the house I want to build, I want to take all this into account. I still want to be that 80-year-old guy out at Tahoe yesterday.
Why not?
Making turns. But I also want to know that for me, aging is honoring the fact that we are on a journey. And the moment that comes to my mind in my office was a gentleman who said that he loves diversity and he doesn't like how Milwaukee's so homogenous. And a few minutes later, he said he hates himself because he looks in the mirror, he's getting older. And I said, Michael, if you stopped aging, if I could make you stop aging, if I could make Yavuz and Adam stop aging, then our society would become very homogenous, which is what you said you hate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the reality is I call it the BD line. We're born and we die.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
what we do in between to try to help each other live the highest quality of life is really about what your work and my work is about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just in the mountains in Tahoe yesterday skiing, and I always admire the gray bearded guy who's with the wool and he's skiing down the mountain. And I always think to myself, I want to be that guy. When I'm 70 and 80, I still want to be making turns out there. But the reality is that my life in America is going to change a lot between now at the age of 45 and when I turn 80. And I'm hoping that America re-embraces what I call the sage phenomenon that I saw in Asia.
Mm-hmm.
The best birthday parties were for older people.
Yeah.
Their perspective is you don't deserve a party if you've only made it to 15.
Yeah,
You know?
I think it's also a part of Japanese culture that they celebrate birthdays. Unlike us, I think we celebrate decades more extravagant. They go by 66, 77. They have a different rhythm, I guess, to celebrate big birthdays. But like you said, it's a huge accomplishment to be that age and to have lived that long and made something of yourself, I guess.
What about in Turkey?
Turkey?
How do they perceive older folks in Turkey?
Oh,
Do they put them in nursing homes like we do here?
the ratio is probably much lower compared to here. It's still the family mostly would care for older persons. They would take the burden, and I think it's mostly always females taking the burden, shouldering the burden.
In Turkey?
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, you used the word burden, and that was what was on my heart when I came back to the United States was, wow, over the age of 55, your social equity in America really drops off.
Yeah, I
And
think I was as I was looking for a home in the Bayview area. I realized that after a certain age, you wouldn't be able to afford the very high taxes, and obviously that pushed you away from where you've lived, let's say for 3-4 decades. And I thought, hey, that's very unfair. But I guess there could be a different way, I guess, to approach it. I don't know how though. I guess intergenerational buildings where older folks and younger people live together and
yeah,
somehow connect and benefit from all that experience and the youth all at once.
I love that idea. I saw at Penn State University that they've now opened up a assisted living, senior living center.
Mm-hmm.
But you're required, if you live on campus as a senior living member, to take at least 2 credits a semester.
Oh,
So it really keeps you engaged in the youthfulness. What trends should we be looking out for or be aware of in terms of environmental gerontology? That's a specialty I wasn't even aware of an hour ago.
Yeah. So what environmental gerontologists do is basically try to understand the environment holistically. So what aspects go into an environment in the sense of senior living, the space itself, but also the people in it and how those people interact with each other. So let's say in a nursing home, it would be the nurses, the CNAs, the people working there, and the residents. So even the vocabulary has changed, whereas you don't see a resident as a patient anymore. They're a guest more than anything else. So even changing the vocabulary changes the dynamic a lot between a nurse and a resident, I believe.
Oh yeah.
But basically, you try to understand how everything works. Like I think it's like opening up a Swiss watch and trying to see how everything ticks together. And then if you know what the little problem areas are, you can touch them just slightly and gently and see if you can, for instance, reduce agitation for a residents by just changing how the spaces are positioned, or how often people interact, or what kind of stimulus they get from the environment. Like, can you tone it down, or can you even let a resident who is not entirely cognitively capable be able to move from one space to another without having to tell somebody about that perceived problem? So if they can do it on their own, maybe you have less burden on the nurse, and it just becomes a very different dynamic when you allow people to make their own choices and be comfortable in a space.
Yeah,
So that's the goal.
I think about things like lighting for me are such a
Yeah,
big
yeah.
deal, and we talk about the fact that most lighting in buildings in America wasn't designed for the health of the brain or the eyes. It's designed to illuminate a room.
Yeah.
And daytime lighting's lacking a lot of red light.
No, there's an awareness now that the temperature of the light makes a huge difference for a resident. There's a concept called the circadian rhythm, which, as a doctor, you're obviously aware of, where by a person who's not exposed to the right amount of and right color of sunlight may be thrown off, and for an older resident, that's really a problem. So if a space is inadequately lit, or the color of the temperature of the light is not right, they may not be able to sleep properly or enjoy their daytime properly. So that's something that facilities are aware of right now. So there's ample lighting, the color temperature is right now. So I think there's a very good positive change towards improving senior living.
Yeah, this is really encouraging to me, and I hope it's encouraging to the rest of our Arise MD network, even just to be aware that there are people with PhDs in environmental gerontology who are out there really working hard to try to create better spaces. And I wonder, Yavuz, what have you learned about aging, and maybe how your perspectives have changed?
Yeah, I'm among the lucky people that actually lived with their grandmas in their homes. So in the summer, as a little kiddo, we'd spend a month, 2 months with our grandparents, or they'd come and stay with us. And both my grandparents actually ended up living with my family, with my parents. So I consider myself to be very lucky in that sense. But being able to give back, although they're not around anymore, being able to give back to others, I think they changed my life perspective they infused some things in my parents, which then they infused into me, and it's just that continuous love for giving to other people that I have right now. So I find myself to be very lucky to be in the senior living realm. Basically, I love it. I love what I'm doing.
And our seniors have such a wealth of experience and knowledge and love to pass on to us, right?
Yeah.
What tips would you give people out there who might be wrestling a bit with their aging parents and needing to consider moving them into a home?
Yeah. So make sure that everyone stays active. It doesn't matter if you're 45 or 75 or 85, you have to stay active. And if you can find an environment and if you can surround yourself with people that allow you to do that, I think that's the key to live a healthy life. Not more years, but the quality of the life itself is, I think that's the key. Spend every day with a positive outlook, I'd say. And in terms of senior living, there are good options out there. Make sure that you are in a facility where it's adequately staffed and you have an opportunity to be engaged, not just in activities within that facility, but outside in the community. So those are the keys.
What about bringing environmental gerontology into your home rather than going to a assisted living center?
Yeah, that's always an option to modify your home to make sure that the environment that you live in is designed properly, and that you basically make sure that you're not tripping over anything, or that you have adequate daylight, you have adequate lighting, you have all the modern technologies to allow you to communicate with people around you, and just make sure that the space is designed with accessibility in mind, even if you don't have a need for it right now. So if you're making a home purchase while you're 50, make sure that you'll be able to use that home when you're 80.
Yeah, good idea. And are you implementing any home technologies like these smart homes, so to speak? Do you use those to help coordinate music on and off, lighting up and down, controlling the ambient temperature, that kind of thing? Are you using those in your build outs?
There's actually a huge branch called technology services that just that they deal with just that. So they bring all sorts of technology into the building, be it monitoring residents to prevent them from walking out without anybody noticing, alarm systems, cameras, and then lighting as well. So you have to make sure the environment is adequate to make sure that nobody harms themselves. And that you provide enough but don't overwhelm people with technology.
That is a fine balance for sure. Do you incorporate any feng shui principles in your work?
I am personally, I take my cues from everything that I see in life. So I love traveling, and I read a lot as well. And feng shui principles, although I'm not an expert, do go into our designs. Yeah.
So, Yavuz, if people want to learn a little bit more about your work, or consider engaging you or your company, what's the company website, or how should they?
Directsupply.com.
Directsupply.com.
And it's also a procurement company. So that's how it got started about 35 years ago, by providing products to actually senior living. And it just expanded from there. The core idea, the core motivation of the company is to help seniors live a better life. And it has never diverted from that core principle. So it has just expanded in that area. And that's all we want to do, provide for a better life for seniors in the US. And from providing products, it has now expanded into providing all sorts of technologies, maintenance software, procurement software, and also now architectural design and interior design.
And so I would love it if you could give us some pointers maybe in the future as well. But there's a Turkish word that you said to me, which is honoring you. To honor.
Yeah, şerefe.
Şerefe.
To your honor.
To your honor.
Yeah,
şerefe.
It's the equivalent of cheers, basically.
Sherefe.
Yeah, perfect pronunciation.
Yavuz, thank you so much
Nice to
for your
meet you.
contribution, and keep up the great work.
Absolutely.